Hey guys, it's Sean, and I'm here to introduce you to another bonus episode of ReelBlend, an interview with actor David Morse. As you guys have seen over the years, we have every once in a while been able to sit down with an actor or a director who's coming back around for a legacy project because it's coming to DVD. And Warner Brothers reached out to us to say that The Green Mile was coming to 4K for the very first time. And David Morse, one of the co-stars of the film, was going to sit down and do some press. So of course we grabbed him for the show because not only is he terrific in The Green Mile opposite Tom Hanks and the late Michael Clarke Duncan, who's fantastic in this. But David Morse has a great, rich history with Stephen King and doing a few other of his adaptations, both for television and for film, and also an audiobook reading of one of the best Stephen King books out there, Revival. So we sat down with David Morse, went over not only his work with Stephen King, but other really important films in his career, including The Rock. You knew that we had to bring up The Rock and talk about his work with Michael Bay. So without further ado, let's get right to our bonus episode with David Morse talking about specifically The Green Mile, but also a lot of the highlights of his prolific acting career.
Well, thank you. I can see I'm clearly outnumbered, and we'll see how
All right, I have a strange question because Green Mile went on to become a nominee for Best Picture. And I'm just curious, when you're working on a film, if you realize that the movie that you're working on has the potential to maybe earn a Best Picture nomination?
Well, I don't think you always do. I've had, been in a couple anyway. This one, I have to honestly say, we knew from the beginning the potential. It just had a great story. It had a great script. Frank had done Shawshank. You knew that you had something that a lot of people wanted to be a part of. And Tom wasn't on board when I was there. I knew they were in discussions with him. And when he came on board, you knew this was just going to go to another level. We'd seen the work that Frank had done. We knew what he could do. So there was the potential to screw it up always, but fortunately that did not happen.
David, I'm not blowing smoke when I say this. Whenever people ask me what's your go-to cry movie, I always say Green Mile, and specifically the execution of John Coffey. I genuinely could not put it on my TV right now and not get tears in my eyes. Can you take me back to the day when you guys shot that? I know that filming movies, it's a lot of start-stop. It's a lot of waiting around. It's a lot of, get this light here and that light there. But do you still feel those kind of emotions that we end up feeling when we see the final product?
Oh, of course. Yeah. By the time we do that scene, we'd already lived together a lot. We'd been through a lot together as actors and as those characters. And the lights and all that stuff, that it just all kind of disappears. Mm-hmm. That's part of movie making. It's, you don't, unless something is really messing up, you don't pay attention to it a whole lot. But when we get in that room together, we've already built a world together, an emotional world together. So that whatever you felt there and we were feeling when we did it, it was incredibly moving.
David, this is as Sean mentioned, a film podcast. So a lot of our listeners are very interested in just filmmaking in general, how films are made, the behind the scenes aspect of it. I spoke to you earlier in our TV interview briefly about this, but I wanted to break down maybe a scene to kind of play it out, how it happened. I know we were talking about the height difference earlier, and you're not that much. Michael Clarke Duncan is not that much taller than you are. And I know it was really interesting how Darabont used certain tricks or boxes in order to make Michael's presence so massive, and everybody else seem to be looking up at him. So maybe the first scene that we when he's introduced, when he comes into the prison and everybody's looking and seeing what he's doing. That's a pretty good scene, I think, to break down in terms of height difference and how that was shot. But could you talk about maybe the boxes you were stepping over, how you guys were achieving that massive height difference?
Yeah. Well, when you watch it in the movie, the first thing you see was something we shot late in the movie, where the van arrives, or that truck arrives with Coffey in the back, and you see the weight of him in there when the truck kind of bounces, whatever it is.
Yeah.
When, somebody big is coming, and you see us looking through the windows. It's like, holy crap, what is this? So it's really building up to, what's going to come through that door. And I think there's a moment between, Paul with Tom and I. It's like, get ready, boss. And he's like, no, he's thinking about his piss or something. And then when he walks through the door, Michael on his own obviously was just an amazing presence. But it was the first time he walked through and we had the boxes there. So we had to, kind of negotiate that for the first time. How are we going to do this as actors? Ignore those things, because those are down below our feet. We can't be looking at them. We really have to be looking up at him, or our attention is somewhere else, and find our way around this world wherever he's walking. We kind of got used to that, but you can't really totally get used to it. But you didn't have to imagine too much with Michael, because he really was big. He was just bigger when he was on those boxes.
Weren't you crouching down, you said, in some scenes, like in some shots, Darabont would have you like bend down a bit and kind of look up?
Yeah, there were some scenes where he couldn't hide. I think it was, we were in, I'm trying to remember which scene it was in. But all of us were there, and they couldn't hide the boxes in that one. But because we had to walk, and somehow we had to be all, scooting down. Yeah, all of you try to do that.
I don't know how I would do that.
Be normal while you're doing
that. One of the things I love that Frank Darabont tends to do is to rely on actual locations, whether it was for Shawshank and then you guys shooting at the Tennessee State Prison. So I was hoping you could tell us how much was shot in the prison, how much, and how that as a location just added to the atmosphere and the ambiance. And it strikes me as people tell me all the time, if they're in Ohio, that they go visit the Shawshank Prison. And I think that's a weird thing to go visit, because it's a place I wouldn't want to go to. It reminds me of Sean Connery's line from your other film, The Rock, when he's told that Alcatraz is a tourist attraction at this point.
Yeah. No, honestly, it was almost all exteriors there. Everything was done on the sets in Los Angeles. It was such a relief to go there, to get off of that Green Mile, because that was almost the only thing I saw. Most of us saw the entire time was that set. Mm-hmm. So when we get to spend a month out there doing the location, so it's actually one scene when that escape happens, and you see in the distance all of us running with Michael Clark Duncan. They hired short people to run with stand-ins to run with Michael.
Wow, really?
Oh, funny.
Yeah. So we weren't there. You saw the silhouettes. I have to say I was a little disappointed in my stand-in. But
did you his performance? You didn't like his performance?
Yeah, don't let him know I said that.
He's actually a big listener of the show.
Yeah. we have him here for a fan question. Hold on one second. No.
So David, we spoke earlier about the day that Stephen King was on set, but I've always been curious though, like what kind, because he's arguably the most popular author in America, maybe in the world right now. What kind of access you have to him before he comes to a set visit? Like, do you get the ability to reach out to him and ask questions? No?
Well, maybe if we wanted to call him, we could do that. And no, that's never happened. Mm-hmm. I would just want to talk to him because he's such a fascinating guy. But it's all there in his stories. It's not really like you need to do that. When I did the Langoliers, which was the first thing I did of his, I was playing an airplane. I had to fly an airplane, a big jet, and I got to spend time with the guys who flew the real jet. And I learned how to fly it in this big L-1011, and I got to taxi around the runway with them and all of that. So that's a kind of research that I don't think Stephen could really help with.
Sure.
And I don't really know what it would be on the Green Mile that he would be helpful with either, because I think he would always only say, listen, I put it on the page. It's there. Go to it.
David, one of the things that I'm a big fan of, obviously I think a lot of people are film scores. And what I find interesting about film scores is when an actor is making a movie, generally speaking, unless the filmmaker is playing some of the music on set, which is rare, or they're playing a soundtrack on set, generally a score is written later in production, post-production, depending on the director. I'm curious for you what it's like emotionally to see your performances set to score, especially Thomas Newman, because he's one of the greatest composers of all time. And you do all the work. You're there on the day. You see the final product put together. Score elevates everything. It enhances every aspect of a film, whether it's there or not there. No score can sometimes do the same thing. So I wonder for you emotionally, what's it like to watch your performance in Green Mile with Thomas's score playing? Like, do you remember the first time you heard it?
No offense to him, but I don't remember it a lot, which is probably a good thing, because I've had the opposite experience where I've done a couple of movies, where I heard a preliminary score. This is what I like it to sound like, these songs. And I thought, oh God, this is amazing. This could be great. And then the composer got there and it's like, wow, he didn't get to this movie at all. Or he put in, instead of acoustic instruments, he puts in electronic instruments, and you hear the electronics, and it just doesn't work with the emotion of the movie to hear that. And it's so disappointing. It clashes with the movie and what you try to do, and the other one, they disappear, or there's so much a part of the emotion that I think those are the best scores. And there's other movies that I've seen where I think the score is brilliant, but all I'm doing is thinking, oh, the score is brilliant. This acting is brilliant, but I'm not. I'm out of the movie because I'm
not in it.
I'm not in it.
That's really interesting. David, you're no stranger to Stephen King adaptations, obviously. A little bit of a two-part. Yeah, I was wondering if you actively seek them out, or if they happen to be projects that come your way, and also if you just have any insight into. We went through a stretch where like Stephen King adaptations were red hot, and they were hitting the theater every couple of months, and then it seems like Hollywood shied away from them, and now they're coming back around in different formats, whether it be longer form television, and people are figuring out how to get back into his work. I was wondering if you had any insight as to why we slowed down on the adaptations.
I don't know if I could say that, other than everything seems to have slowed down except for the Marvel Comics world. All those movies that I did, like The Negotiator.
Yes.
Those were middle budget kind of movies, and they started crashing. And the only thing that seemed to survive, and barely, were the independent movies where nobody made any money on them, or the big budget movies. And I think the biggest budget movie I did was World War Z, which was, out of this world in terms of production. But I don't really know the answer to that. Stephen, the movies that I really was attracted to of his were, you felt the heart in them. There were human beings in them. Green Mile's an obvious one. Stand By Me and Hearts in Atlantis. I love those. And it's a peek into Stephen. And sometimes it's almost a little disappointing when he goes to the Stephen King stuff. They're so totally in the world with those characters. And then I go, okay, here we go. And, go for the Stephen King ride. And it's almost like being taken out of it a little bit, because it's like the music. You're seeing Stephen King, or you're hearing that music instead of totally being in there.
That's interesting. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, people are always like shocked to hear that Shawshank is a Stephen King story.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
People are. I know exactly what you're saying. I know exactly.
There's that famous story. I don't know if you've read On Writing, where a woman approached him at the grocery store and said, just so you know, I know who you are, and I really wish you would write more stuff like that Shawshank Redemption. And he tried to say, "Ma'am, I did write." I don't think she believed him. I think she walked away. David, when it comes to Stephen King monsters, I think our mind goes to, I don't know, maybe Jack Torrance or Pennywise or Cujo. But I honestly think that Percy Whitmore might be one of the most terrifying monsters he's ever written. I'm just curious what your thoughts are in terms of Percy and the pantheon of Stephen King evil that we've seen, and acting opposite. Like I watched that movie and I actually want to strangle the man. And so when you're in that moment, how you obviously acting, but like how the sort of emotions that character made you feel on set.
No, I actually wanted to strangle the man. But that's a tribute to Doug Hutchinson. First of all, it's a great role. Stephen and Frank created just, as you say, one of the most awful villains in a movie. But part of what made him so awful, besides Doug's great performance, was our investment in Coffee, our investment in Mr. Jingles. Where our hearts were in the movie. So when he did those things, they were really bad.
David, one of the things that I find really interesting, and this is something I'm sure you've talked about before, but the mice are such a massive part of the story. And there's such an interesting aspect to that, because directing that must have been insane. Like, I can't imagine like how they even, like, Darabont even played with that. I'm assuming that, I read there were like real mice, and then they would do laser pointers at some point. Can you talk about like what that process was like? What was the craziest thing you had to do for any of the mice sequences? Because I don't think people realize how hard those scenes probably were to film.
Well, first of all, Frank was smart. He gave directing those to somebody else to do. So there was always a second unit on the set. We'd have to be quiet for, it's Mr. Jingle scene. Oh, he's over here shooting Mr. Jingle scene. Okay, everybody, we stand around while they shoot the little Mr. Jingles on the floor doing his stuff in the second unit. And Frank would go over and look at the monitor and check things out, but he wasn't directing those. He would have spent all his time directing those things. Those mice were great. I give those mice all the credit in the world, but they're animals, and it's a lot of work.
So was the laser pointer thing true? Was that one of the ways that you had your eye lines? Like, how? That's so cool.
Yes, that was for us. It absolutely was. Yeah. And I think there was probably, the scene where he comes out the first time and he comes all the way down, and I think we were actually there and got to see that. But when they actually shot our side of it, when they turned around and looked at us, obviously there's no mice there. We got to watch it and got to some kind of experience of seeing the mouse really do this. But we had our little laser pointer, and so we're all in the same place, and being good actors.
It's like a cat. Like a cat. Cats love laser pointers. Like, hey.
I'm surprised that Tom Hanks didn't go after it himself. Down on the floor with it.
David, you've been blessed to work, consistently for years and work with some of the most interesting directors as well too. And quite often very closely back to back. And the transition that fascinates me with Green Mile is going from this to Dancer in the Dark, which is such an incredible film. And I would assume Lars Von Trier is a different ride for an actor. How much time was in between each of those projects? Did you go right from one to the other, or was there some distance? And is it hard to like compartmentalize what you just did on Green Mile and then dive into that world?
During those years, I was really going full out. There was not a lot of time. My kids were young. Our kids, Susan, my kids were young. She was basically a single mother during those years. I was gone up to 9 months out of the year, every year, which was lucky, but it takes a toll. It's hard on a family. The transition, because I'd done so much theater, I'd done a lot of different characters. The transition wasn't as hard as you would imagine. The personalities, there's always an adjustment. Some people make it harder than others to work with them. Lars was not one of them. Lars had a reputation, and I made a joke to him about this kind of when on my last day of shooting and it was over. And I thanked Lars the Tyrant for asking me to be in this movie, because he was anything but a tyrant.
Yeah.
And if you listen to Bjork talk about it, you would think he was the worst person in the world. Now, Bjork, she had been a star most of her life since she was 13 years old, controlled her whole world, controlled her music, controlled everything. And here she was really for the first time having someone
being controlled.
That's right. Giving her directions. It was hard for her, but she was a phenomenal person to be an actor with, because her commitment to that character was so complete. And it's like being with Michael Clark Duncan. They're so alive. They are who they are, and it makes you alive. And Lars, I don't know if you want to hear all of this, but
sure. We very much do.
This is our show.
Yeah, with Frank, he and the people who worked with him before warned us about this. And he said, listen, when Frank wrote this, he struggled over every comma in the script. He knows everything in the script. It's all in his head. He knows the colors in this movie. Basically, you're helping him to fulfill what he sees in his head. Mm-hmm. And when you go with that, that's fine. Some people have a harder time with that than others to do that. Once you know what you're doing, you're there to help him create what he has seen in his head and sees in his head. Lars was the opposite of that. You're doing a scene. He shot his on video, which I hadn't done before. There's two things. There was the 100 cameras that he did for the musical numbers, where he placed 100 cameras, hid them all over the place, and then and the musical numbers happened through those 100 cameras. But the other scenes, the scenes that were not musical numbers, he was shooting the film, and he had a Ikigami, whatever it was, maybe Sony, over his shoulder. This fantastic DP would come in, light the room. Everybody would disappear except for the boom guy. So it was just Lars with the camera and the boom guy and the actors. And he had a script, and you do, I'm thinking one scene in particular with Bjork. We're talking about the money, and it's very emotional. And we do it the first time, and I'm weeping. And Lars is, he never stopped shooting. The thing's just rolling the whole time. He says, no. What I wrote is shit. It's just shit. Just say what your subtext is. Just do it again with your subtext. So you do the scene again, and you do it just not with the dialogue, but with the subtext. He says, okay, now just put in this line. He never stopped shooting. 45 minutes, as much time as he could go. You're doing this over and over again. And it's improvised and different every single time you do it. And right. It was fantastic. It was such a great bit of work.
The difference with digital, I know the film provides, shooting on film provides an aspect, but being able to improvise on digital and have that kind of extra time to play is invaluable.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to tell you these things, but, the closest thing I had to happen at was, Homicide, The Life on the Street, that series Homicide. But there was a TV movie I did called Murder Live, where it was based on something that actually happened in a reality TV show, daytime TV show. And my character takes over a reality TV talk show. And the way we shot it was, and it was a film director who shot it, is we literally shot nonstop from commercial break to commercial break. And had a bunch of cameras. So it was nonstop. There was no cutting. And it was the same sort of feeling of improvising. It's for the whole length of a roll of film. And that was where the commercial breaks were.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow.
That is very cool.
David, speaking of television, a lot of people talk about the age of television we're in now, sort of the golden age of TV, and their appointment viewing. We make a point to watch certain stuff, and a lot of people forget that when Stephen King originally published The Green Mile, he published it episodically. I believe it came out in like 6 different parts, and he's had a couple of adaptations get sort of the TV treatment, and obviously he's written a few pieces for television as well. Do you think that The Green Mile could work as like a limited TV series? Would it would it be a different animal if it were translated for television?
Well, I think if it was done now, it probably would be done exactly like you're saying, as a limited series. It's 3 hours and 17 minutes, something like that. And the critics were really harsh and hard on it when it came out because of the length. Nobody who ever watched it complained about it. It was only the critics who complained about it. But I've always thought, and I think now, thankfully we can do it, is there are so many of these stories that have suffered because they're trying to cram a whole novel into 2 hours.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. When I did Indian Runner with Sean, he wrote one of my favorite scripts I ever read. I couldn't even believe he wrote it when I first read it. It was so beautiful. And he shot that script and had a 4-hour movie. And it broke his heart that he had to cut out, almost 2 hours of what he wrote. He cut out entire characters. And when we did The Crossing Guard, instead of writing a 120-page script, which is sort of standard, he wrote an 85-page script and knew we were going to improvise a lot of the movie for Crossing Guard. And he may have, who knows, it may have hurt the movie that he didn't do a full script, but whatever. Yes, I think now that probably would be a limited series rather than a feature.
So, David, probably the first movie that I remember seeing you in as a kid, it was 1997, and I have my ticket for it, which is The Rock. And I will never forget my dad and my mom, my brother, and I went to this theater to see it. And my dad and I remember sitting in the theater and like being blown away by it. I love Michael Bay. But what I love about The Rock is outside of Michael Bay's idea of what, he's an action filmmaker, that movie had a really interesting emotional core to it. The whole Ed Harris storyline, everything with that, his arc, like going from what he wanted to do and then changing his mind. It was so incredibly well made, and not just a mindless action movie. It was awesome. And I wanted to talk to you about your experience on that set. That was a young Michael Bay. I mean, this is like right after Bad Boys. And I'm just wondering what you remember about that filmmaker at that time, your experience on that movie, because it's one of my favorite action movies of all time, but I also feel like it's underrated in terms of its emotional core. I really do.
Well, if you really want to know the experience, which obviously you do because you're asking. I met Michael Bay, I auditioned for him. I was doing a one-person play down in La Jolla, and I went up on my day off and auditioned for him for The Rock. He was a really nice guy, and the role I auditioned for originally was the guy who would be the bad guy who went all the way to the end. And it was still the same character, but my character was the bad guy who was right there until the end. So I was thrilled to get it. And when I went there for the first read through, Sean Connery came over, a real gentleman, came over, shook my hand and said, "Hello, I'm Sean Connery." I said, "No kidding." Thank you for introducing yourself. And then I looked at the script and I wasn't the bad guy anymore. Now I was Baxter, who dies at the, 20 pages before the end. It's like, what happened? I was really disappointed because nobody warned me about it. But I also had the feeling that, we got good actors here. Nicholas has done some really good stuff, but this could stink. This could really stink. And I know that he was bringing in, Jerry Bruckheimer was bringing in like Aaron Sorkin to do a polish on it. It kept, all the time we're shooting, they bring in Aaron Sorkin to do a week's work on it. I wouldn't be surprised if Frank was asked to do something. A lot of people did some polishes on that. And over time, that really became a better script. And like you said, you got Ed Harris and Nicholas, who was, really doing some good work. And it was surprising to me how good it was. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, it's the thing about the ensemble. The ensemble was good. John McGinley, all those those soldiers. We had the real Navy SEALs there. We were working with those, and they trained us. The Navy SEALs were in the movie. We trained with them. That scene where they're all shot in the shower. Oh. It's brutal.
But, that guy falls down into oh my God. Yeah.
But there was we were invested. Everybody was invested in it, and you could feel it. And Michael's not easy to work with. And I think he's probably just gotten harder to work with. And he has a reputation for that. But he really has a brilliant eye for making movies. And he did some of the best technical people, DP I'd ever seen. And the DP would set up the shot. Michael would come in, look at the shot, and he would just move the camera a little bit. And you go, wow, it was a good shot. That's an amazing shot. Wow. And that's what Michael has. And it's really something.
God, I love that movie. Have you watched that recently? Just out of curiosity, have you watched any of your older films?
And did you and Michael Clarke Duncan ever trade? No, because wasn't he just off of Armageddon when he did Green Mile?
Oh, that's right.
I actually was asked to do Armageddon. I went in and I auditioned for the role that Billy Bob Thornton did.
Oh, wow. The NASA director.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't have been nice if I got that role. But they offered me the role that Bill did, which was another military guy. I didn't really want to do it. And I actually was being offered 3 movies at exactly the same time. One was The Negotiator.
F. Gary Gray. Oh,
Armageddon.
Chicago.
And something that Joel Schumacher was doing, one of the the lawyer movies. I was being offered all 3 at the same time. And I thought, when Michael didn't offer me the role that Billy Bob did, I was really a little hurt. But I called him to thank him for offering me, and I got his assistant. And I said, I just wanted to say, thanks for Michael, but I have to go with this other movie. It's for the role. And I could tell his assistant was terrified that he was going to have to tell Michael the news that it was the wrong way to do it. And apparently they got pretty upset. And Jerry Bruckheimer got upset with me and thought I had screwed them or something. So I never got offered another movie with those guys.
Well,
I love The Negotiator, so you did a great job.
You did okay with yourself. David, we are out of time, but obviously we wish we had plenty more time. There's so many more gems in your career that we would love to get into. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us to talk Green Mile and to dive into. So I would love to talk. I just want to talk Diary of a City Priest. I think that's one of your best roles.
Yeah.
I love that film.
Yeah. Well,
thank you very much.
Well, you 3 guys are really fun to talk to, and I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
We want to thank David Morse for joining us as a guest on ReelBlend. As always, we love being able to dive into the intricacies of how select scenes are filmed, and him talking about, the death of John Coffey in The Green Mile, and Michael Clarke Duncan's performance was truly, truly moving. And I don't think I'm ever going to really look at that scene or the film in general the same way without, now knowing that we've had this chance to speak with him. So thank you, David, for coming on the show. I want to tease for the real ones who have made it all the way through the interview and stuck around for the closing of this video that we have some really exciting things coming. Joe Wright, the director of Atonement, who has a new film called Cyrano finally hitting theaters. We spoke with him a little bit earlier, and now that full interview is about to run. And I guess now we can reveal because it happened. Hashtag it happened. We're getting Matt Reeves on the show. Matt Reeves is going to join ReelBlend for 30 minutes to talk about the Batman. And it is every bit as geeky as ReelBlend fans are hoping that it is going to be. Definitely one we circled on the calendar a long time ago when Reeves' name was attached to the Batman. We said we have to get him for the show, and we're thrilled that he was able to stop by. So that's coming up very, very soon. If you're here on the YouTube channel, make sure you hit subscribe. Thank you so much. You guys have pushed us over 6,000 subscribers. It means that the word of ReelBlend is spreading, and you guys are sharing with your film-loving fans news about us. And keep it here locked in on our channel for all the exciting content coming up, including, like I said, Joe Wright talking Cyrano and Matt Reeves talking the Batman.